People say to me, have mercy, have mercy.
Hey, this is the Good, the Bad, and the Wrestling, a Tony James podcast. And on this episode, I'm picking a fight. That's right, I'm going to pick a fight. I feel I've got the top 3 ever face versus face matches. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean they were the greatest matches, but I'm saying, on paper, if done properly, the best 3 face versus face matches. So we're going to talk about who they are. We're going to talk about the setup, the aftermath, the actual matches, how great the matches were. Did the storylines pan out? It doesn't matter. I've got what I think are the top 3 greatest face versus face matches of all time. Do you think you can top it, match it, or beat it? Let's find out. Let's get to work. Hey, this is the Good, the Bad, and the Wrestling, a Tony James podcast. And as always, the bells of justice are ringing. And today, I've got a great topic. It might spark some interest. It might spark some controversy, or at least an argument or two. I want to talk about the 3 greatest face versus face matches. And I'm going to say in wrestling history, we could probably argue there might be a couple matches in Memphis wrestling history in the early 50s, but for the most part, I'm going to pick these 3. And if there's anybody out there who wants to argue AWA, NWA, there could be one out of world class, I say bring it. But I'm going to pick these 3. Before I do, however, I want to give a shout out to my sponsors, Three Brothers RC, Southpaw Boxing Club, my quiet yet financial sponsor, Sinbad's Gym, Jose Sanchez Boots. I want to thank the PWA, the Premier Wrestling Alliance, for their support and their ability to allow certain wrestling matches to occur that fits with the Good, the Bad, and the Wrestling's independent scene, where we're starting to rank independent wrestlers, non-PWA roster members as well. They wrestle all over the United States and in the UK. We've been ranking those. You can see those in prior episodes. And the goal is at one point that the committee that's been formed that are ranking these wrestlers actually create a championship title and everyone will fight for it. So I just want to thank my sponsors in the PWA and the committee, the Indie Wrestling Committee, putting that together. With that being said, I want to jump right into this episode, the 3 greatest face versus face matches. Now, when I say greatest, I mean everything that could be, should be, and would be. We're going to go through the matches, the cards that set it up. We're going to talk about what they drew, what happened, the after effects after the fact, before the fact, whatever, all the elements surrounding it. And then at the end of the day, it's going to come down to, I'm going to tell you right now, even if we don't talk about it, you're going to be able to talk about the difference between traditional and modern, if it were to happen today, what it is. And because once again, it comes down to the wrestlers themselves rather than the match. So with that being said, the first face versus face match I want to talk about is from 1972. September 30th, 1972, the Worldwide Wrestling Federation in Flushing, New York at Shea Stadium drew 22,508 wrestling fans. It was called the Showdown at Shea. There are many showdowns at Shea. This was the one from 72. It was called the Match of the Century. And it was Bruno-Sammartino, the challenger, versus Pedro Morales, the champion. So what had been going on? Of course, we know that Ivan Koloff defeated Bruno-Sammartino after his very long run. I believe 9 days later, in that vicinity, Pedro beat Ivan Koloff. held the belt for 3+ years, started tagging with Bruno Sammartino, and during a match, I believe, with Albano and Fuji, or one of those tag matches, they were both blinded in the match by the salt, and both started wailing on each other and decided, hey, that's the build-up, we're going to have a match. And so people were calling this the match of the century. They could not believe that these two were going at it. Think about it. Two huge baby faces, Bruno Sammartino, the man, the myth, the legend, versus Pedro Morales, who, believe it or not, had almost the same groundswell support that Bruno had. There is rumor that and you can find some of this on YouTube, there's rumor that Pedro, this could not happen at Madison Square Garden because they didn't think it would go well, that Pedro never lost at the Garden because his followers were so passionate that they were worried that there would be riots, someone would get hurt. And even though it was Bruno Sammartino, if Pedro's followers felt that something went awry, that Bruno would have a problem. So they had it at Shea. That's the underlying message leading up to the Showdown at Shea 72 card, the match of the century. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, knowing pro wrestling, especially at that time, people came to see Pedro Morales versus Bruno Sammartino. People came to see Pedro defend his title against Bruno. Now, remember, everybody wanted Bruno to get the title back. Pedro's held the belt now going on a very long time. So, and these two guys were buds. They were tagging. And, of course, not in this episode, but you'll know later that Bob Backlund tagged, I'm trying to think, with Pedro Morales, and they won the tag team titles during Bob's heavyweight title reign. So, with that being said, it was just one of those things that the WWF did, just to kind of maybe test the waters with their champs. And so Bruno looking for the title, people loving Pedro Morales. What went down? Well, for the first match went 8 minutes, 25 seconds. It was Little Beaver and Little Louie, and they defeated Pee Wee Adams and Sonny Boy Hayes. El Olympico defeated Chuck O'Connor in 5 minutes and 15 seconds. Jack Briscoe defeated Mr. Fuji in 14 minutes and 7 seconds. Gorilla Monsoon and Ernie Ladd wrestled to a draw for 20 minutes, but was given the decision by the referee. So however that goes. Chief Jay Strongbow and Sonny King defeated Lou Albano and the Spoiler in 4 minutes and 28 seconds. And the Fabulous Moolah defended her title against Debbie Johnson in 7 minutes, 27 seconds. Now, that led us to the Pedro Morales-Bruno Sammartino match. It ended in a curfew draw. So they said it went an hour 15. Majority of the reports, people who have done a review of that match on YouTube, because you can't find the match, only pictures. Not saying they don't have footage, but there's not footage out there to my knowledge. Plenty of pictures, though. An hour went an hour 5, so it went curfew. They did an overtime or tried to do something, and then they just called it. Fans were very disappointed, not only that it was in a draw, but they were disappointed in the type of match. People called it a real snoozer. You had two faces going at it. At one point, George Steele did a run-in, but was stopped by security, so he never even made it to the ring. Now, it was said that the McMahon Sr. sent George down there to add a heel tone to the match. I don't know what he was expecting to happen, that both faces would turn on George, kick him out of the ring, but he never made it to the ring, and they continued to wrestle until it went curfew. So, what's my point in this? Why would I call it the greatest? Well, look, you got Bruno Sammartino, the longest reigning WWF champion. He gets beat. The guy that beats him gets beat by Pedro. Pedro holds on to the title, and he becomes Mr. Madison Square Garden. And so you finally get the big showdown that you want. It's very rare that you get two faces fighting each other. And knowing the type of guys they are and the style of wrestling, the kicks, the punches, the bear hugs, those types of, brawlers, yet I guess you could call them scientific. They're facing off, so you're expecting, as they call it, the match of the century, but it just didn't turn out that way. It was a big draw at the time, 22,000. But it didn't turn out that well. And of course, we know later, shortly after that, Pedro Morales drops the title to Stan the Man Stasiak, who holds the belt. I don't know if he held it for 21 days, but it was a very short title reign. And then who picked it up? Bruno Sammartino. Bruno Sammartino beats Stan the Man and then continues on for another very lengthy title run until he drops it to Superstar Billy Graham in 76, 77 era in that range. So, Bruno kept it for another 5, 6 years before he dropped it to Superstar. So what happened to Pedro after the fact? Well, Bruno goes on after the match of the century to gain the heavyweight title. Pedro goes on to continue his Madison Square Garden run, and then much later on, wins the tag belts. So he becomes a Triple Crown threat or Triple Crown champion. Bruno gets to have his second title reign. So it doesn't hurt Pedro that much, but it did kind of, when you have the high expectation of a Bruno-Pedro Morales match, to get what they got, as fans stated. However, it did draw, and it was the match that people came to see. There was nothing else people wanted to see other than the Pedro-Bruno match. So that's the first one I'm talking about, the Showdown at Shea, the match of the century, September 30th, 1972. Bruno Sammartino versus Pedro Morales. Now, going on to match number two. WrestleMania 12. Okay, the Iron Man match. Shawn Michaels versus Bret Hart, Bret Hart being the champion. World Wrestling Federation, March 31st, 1996, Anaheim, California, Arrowhead Pond of Anaheim, 18,843. And of course, they had pay-per-view at the time, and they were saying it was 290,000 buy rate. So the main attraction, of course, was the Iron Man match. It was built around Bret Hart wanting to retain his title against Shawn Michaels, who had suffered a number of setbacks over the course of the year, failing to defeat Diesel and doing other things. People may argue that it wasn't a face versus face, but come on, man, this is Bret Hart's a face. You can't tell me he's a heel in this match, and everybody loves Shawn Michaels no matter what's going on. These were two faces. Now, of course, once you get to the end, and this started the path to the Montreal Screwjob, of course. You had two. The crowd was split, and it was an Iron Man match, so you were going 60. Now, my question is going to be, it didn't draw as much as Shea in 72. 96, they were on the cusp of maybe getting some of their steam back. WrestleMania 12, I think everybody came to see the heavyweight title fight. You had the Body Donnas defeat the Godwins for the tag team match, was for the vacant title. It went 5 minutes, 22 seconds. The Huckster versus Nacho Man ended in a no contest. The Bulldog and Owen Hart and Vader defeated Ahmed Johnson, Jake the Snake Roberts, and Yokozuna in 13 minutes and 8 seconds. Roddy Piper defeated Goldust in the Hollywood Backlot Brawl, 16 minutes, 47 seconds. Stone Cold Steve Austin defeated Savio Vega in 10 minutes, 5 seconds. The Ultimate Warrior defeated Hunter Hearst Helmsley in 1:39. The Undertaker defeated Diesel by pinfall, 16 minutes, 46 seconds. And then, boom, you had Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart go at it. They win a 60-minute draw and then went into overtime. And Shawn Michaels defeated Bret Hart for the title. Now, out of the two, I'm always going to be a Bret Hart fan. I always feel that Bret Hart's the much better wrestler. When you put Bruno versus Pedro, I think they mirror each other. I think you kind of romanticize a little bit about the quality of Bruno's wrestling when you watch his matches. He's a lot of punch and kick and brawl, and then he will put you in an armbar, a bear hug, and other things. Bret Hart definitely had a wider range of maneuvering. Shawn Michaels, everybody thinks he's the greatest of all time. I don't see it. I don't get it. I'm not taking anything away from him. This is a really good match, but I still feel Bret Hart was the draw and was the better wrestler as it pertains to longevity. But nonetheless, it only drew about 18,000 fans. And I feel once again that that's the main event. That's what people came to see. Now, moving forward from that, Bret loses the title to Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels is pissed he's in the ring, tell him to get out. Michaels starts to become a problem behind the scenes. He turns heel. Bret comes back, they feud, and then you get the whole Bret leaving thing, and then it all goes down to the Montreal Screwjob, Bret going to WCW. Shawn Michaels losing his smile and then coming back and then taking time off from his back injury and coming back 5-6 years later. Bret having to retire after the Goldberg kick. So if you think about it, this was kind of it, right? This was the thing. So a draw, Pedro keeps it, ends up losing it. It didn't do much for his career as the champ. Bret Hart losing to Shawn Michaels. Beating Bret Hart definitely put Shawn Michaels over to the next level. How great would it have been if Bruno would have put Pedro over, only either to wrestle again and beat Pedro or to have it go the way it did. No one really put anybody over in that first face-to-face match in '72, whereas in this one, what I like about this is you have a winner. You want a winner when you build it up. On this very day, Shawn Michaels was better than Bret Hart, but it created the mystique and the argument that, yes, but if they wrestle 3 more times, Bret's going to win the 3, or, whatever it may be, the Bret Hart legacy actually built as well. So I thought it was a great idea. I love the 60-minute Iron Man match. I just kind of felt like your expectations coming out of that match, maybe Shawn Michaels couldn't quite hit that mark. Bret Hart could wrestle anybody. They say Shawn Michaels could wrestle anybody, but you also got the frame of mind he was in at the time. I don't agree with that. When you go back and watch his matches with Vader and Sid and all those other things, and then you go back and watch what Bret Hart did and who he made, I just feel like coming out of this, Bret's trajectory, his path, I felt was much more beneficial to him than Shawn Michaels winning the title. However, I still feel that this is one of the top 3 face versus face matches. It wasn't a snoozer. When you watch this, the buildup of the match is slow, but they are going 60 minutes, and they know where to hit certain things to keep the crowd interested. There was a buzz in the crowd. We don't have video footage to watch of the Pedro Bruno. We just have accounts that it was a snoozer, where I don't call the Iron Man at all a snoozer. That's what you're worried about with 60 minutes. But once again, they did a great job of keeping you interested, the drama, what was going to happen, and then knowing, of course, that they needed to go to sudden death. I just thought it was a great buildup. So that's why I feel that the Hart Michaels match at WrestleMania 12 is one of the greatest face versus face matches. Once again, I wish we had footage of the Bruno Pedro match, because then we could compare and actually rank. I don't think it's fair if you don't have the video to watch to kind of say which match was better. Nonetheless, match number 2, WrestleMania 12, Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels Iron Man match. Now, the final of the 3. You know what it is. You got to know, right? WrestleMania 6, Hulk Hogan versus the Ultimate Warrior, champion versus champion, winner take all at the Sky Dome. It was World Wrestling Federation once again, April 1st, 1990, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, Sky Dome, 67,678, called the Ultimate Challenge. So you had the match of the century, the Iron Man match, and now you have the Ultimate Challenge. Once again, great packaging with face versus face. I think it's great. We all know the storyline leading up. Warrior had his feud with Rick Rude, wins the title back, has obstacles, and then Hogan and him face off at the Royal Rumble. Then they have a couple tag matches against the Genius and Mr. Perfect. a couple misled clotheslines, and the next thing you know, we've got a challenge and an acceptance, and bang, we're off to the races for WrestleMania 6. You can't tell me there's another match on this card people want to come to see. They're coming to see the Ultimate Warrior versus Hulk Hogan. So what's the lineup? You had Paul Roma defeating the Brooklyn Brawler. You had Rick Martel defeating Coco Beware in 3 minutes 51 seconds. Demolition defeated the Colossal Connection, Andre and Haku, to win the titles back. 9 minutes 30 seconds. Andre turned face. Earthquake defeated Hercules in 4 minutes and 52 seconds. Brutus Beefcake beat the undefeated Mr. Perfect in 7 minutes 48 seconds. Piper beat Bad News Brown, or actually I should say it was a double count out, 6 minutes 48 seconds. That was a bit of a disappointment. I was kind of hoping that match would go longer. I thought we'd see a longer brawl. This was crazy. The Hart Foundation beat the Bolsheviks in 19 seconds. The Barbarian beat Tito Santana in 4 minutes and 33 seconds. Dusty Rhodes and Sapphire defeated Savage and Queen Sherry in 7 minutes 52 seconds. The Orient Express defeated the Rockers in 7 minutes 38 seconds. Jim Duggan beat Dino Bravo in 4 minutes 15 seconds. Ted DiBiase defeated Jake Roberts by countout in 11 minutes 50 seconds. Big Boss Man defeated Akeem, 1 minute 49 seconds. Rick Rude beat Jimmy Snuka in 3 minutes 59 seconds. Large card, short matches. Very short. And then, boom, you get the vignette, the big package leading up to the Ultimate Challenge. The Intercontinental Champion, the Ultimate Warrior, versus Hulk Hogan. Now, you know that there's always been a discrepancy now, especially now that AEW put the numbers they did in at Wembley. Now they're saying that every pay-per-view or every big show that WWF put out is inflated numbers, and those numbers aren't real. Okay, whatever. I'm going with 67,000. So out of the three, this drew the most. Out of the three, this was the shortest match. It went 24 minutes, 51 seconds, the Ultimate Warrior defeating Hulk Hogan. The one element I liked about it, we got a winner. The other element, everybody thought when Hogan kicked out of the press that he was going to hit that leg drop, and when he didn't, it freaked everyone out. So to pass the torch, people say Hogan didn't pass the torch. He did. He passed it to the Ultimate Warrior. Bruno would have been great to pass it to Pedro. He didn't. You could say Hart passed it to Shawn Michaels. Hogan passed it to Warrior. Great match. For a guy like Warrior who couldn't go long, of course, we know if you really know Hogan's lineage, he can do what he needs to do. He was wrestling the post-WrestleMania 3 Hogan style, so therefore 3 punches, a boot, and a leg drop, cup in the ear, getting the crowd into it. But the guy could wrestle, and he showed that in his match against Warrior. That was all Hogan leading that. For Hogan to put him over, big deal. The way the kick out with 3 3/4 was great. I thought everything leading up to it was great. I thought the match itself kept your interest. There were a couple times when you thought it was going home, and then Hogan got knocked out and outside, hurt his knee. You thought, okay, he's going to have an injured leg the rest of the match. So there was a lot of really good things going on there. You could see a certain style Hogan kind of earmarked certain guys into, the guys that were big and strong, with the test of strength and the you do a slam, I do a slam, you throw me in a corner, I throw you in the corner thing. But there was a lot of variety between the bells as well. So I thought this was a really good match. Going out of that, of course, Hogan took some time off, right, and did his thing. Warrior did some stuff with Ted DiBiase. Had, I thought, a really good cage match against Rick Rude. I thought that should have gone a little longer, and then they started putting him in 6-mans with LOD, which didn't make sense to me, and they started to see that maybe that wasn't working out that great. I thought that a real Savage Warrior match with Warrior as champ would have been a great feud. That came into play more so before WrestleMania 7, after Royal Rumble, where Warrior dropped the belt to Sergeant Slaughter. So they gave Warrior a chance to run with it. It just didn't pick up a lot of steam. And now I believe if Warrior could have had matches like he did with Hogan with other guys, which we know he could have it with Rick Rude. We definitely know he could have it with Ted DiBiase. He's got a match with him over in Japan, I think, with SWS. That if you watch that, Ted DiBiase can lead the Ultimate Warrior around and have a good match with him. So Macho Man could have a good match with him. So he just kind of fizzled out, and so they put the belt on Sergeant Slaughter, and here comes Hogan for another run. That's not Hogan's fault. I mean, they just kept going back to him. I would have preferred to see him just hold on to the belt for a couple title reigns and then have someone like this beat him and then stick with it. Would it have worked if they would have stuck with Ultimate Warrior through WrestleMania 7? Maybe work to a rematch in 8? I don't know. But these three, I think, are the three greatest face versus face matches. And all three, I believe, people wanted to see the main event. They all drew. Did they all deliver? They were all different times. WrestleMania 6 completely outdrew WrestleMania 12 6 years later. Different style, different champion. 96 wasn't as hot as 1990. 72 was hot, but you put two faces in, sometimes it doesn't work. And now you know why people have always steered clear of that. And that could be because of the Pedro Morales-Bruno Sammartino match. Sometimes styles make the match. And in my opinion, Morales and Sammartino being identical, I think that's why that probably came off the way people said as a snoozer. I think Bret Hart is the excellence of execution, as Gorilla Monsoon once quoted, but he did not quote that on, he did not quote that on Bret Hart originally. I want to say it was Ricky Steamboat, but I'll have to go back and check the log on that. And then Hogan, I mean, you got to give him his props. This was huge draw, 67,000. This was a big match. It made Ultimate Warrior. It put him on the map. Just like I feel Bret Hart put Shawn Michaels on the map. And then Bruno didn't put, Pedro was on the map. This would have put Pedro over. It didn't. And of course, we know later why, because Pedro lost the title and it went back on Bruno anyway. So that's why I think these are your three top greatest face versus face matches out there. Watching the two, once again, we don't have video footage of Morales-Sammartino, so it's hard to say which match was better. You can line them up. In today's modern age of wrestling, I think it's the experience in the multiple matches that draw, not one match, which is a shame. Because you got to have a ton of different matches on there that people want to see, and the ratings still aren't the ratings, and overall the draw isn't the draw. It just isn't, because they're, in my opinion, with those six wrestlers, whether you like them or not, who's comparable to those six in modern wrestling right now? Who's comparable where you want to see the match? You wanted to see Brock versus Cody? Absolutely. You want to see Cody versus Roman Reigns? People wanted to see that. Cody seems to be the common denominator there, right? So other than that, I believe people went to Wembley because they wanted to see pro wrestling, not necessarily what was on the card. That's my opinion. So I think this shows you that it's about the guy and getting over more so than the overall experience and just come to see the wrestling matches. They drew what they could draw. I still believe in 72, 22,000 is a great draw, especially with who was in the main event. In 96, 18,000, they put it in that venue for a reason. When you listen to Bruce Pritchard talk about the venues they chose, they picked venues that they knew they could sell. If they knew they could put 60, 70,000 somewhere, they would have put the Iron Man match in there. They didn't. They knew they could draw with Hogan versus Warrior, and they did. So it's not necessarily about the match skills. It's about the guys. It's about putting butts in the seats. And Hogan Warrior did that. All three matches, I feel, did that. And once again, we're just not going to rate the in-ring quality because we only have two of the three matches that we can actually look at. The two that we do have, totally different styles. Once again, Hogan-Warrior is a totally different match than Michaels Hart, even though Hogan did do a lot of mat wrestling with Warrior to hold him down and wear him out. You got to give the nod to Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels when it comes to mat skills if you're looking at that type of ranking. But nonetheless, to me here at the Good, the Bad, and the Wrestling of Tony James podcast, I feel that those are your three top face versus face matches. Bruno versus Pedro, Bret Hart versus Shawn Michaels, and Hulk Hogan versus Ultimate Warrior. Hey, you can find me on Facebook. Got a couple different Facebook sites. You can find me at Outlaw Tony James. You can find me at Just Tony James Podcast on Facebook. You can find me over at YouTube at the Good, the Bad, and the Wrestling of Tony James Podcast. And you can always find me on Instagram at Outlaw Tony James. I want to thank my sponsors once again. I'm looking forward to working with the PWA on some of these independent matches. Hopefully we can sign some of these big names and bring them stateside and have some great matches here in the PWA. With that being said, thank you for listening. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. God is good. And we will see you at the matches.